Welcome to today's edition of Baits of the Gospel Today. Today we are reaching out from the chapel of Our Lady of Annunciation in the Little House of Divine Providence, one of the 25 chapels in this big complex, otherwise known as Kotolengo. We continue our reflections in Easter. Mark chapter 16, verse 9 to 15. Having risen in the morning of the first day of the week, Jesus appeared first to Mary of Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 devils. She then went to those who had been his companions and who were mourning in tears and told them. But they did not believe her. When they heard her say that he was alive and that she had seen him, that's the way the Gospel of Mark presents to us the character of the team that Jesus Christ had chosen. 3 times in this Gospel, we are told that the disciples did not believe. Speaking in terms of human resource management, these people are incompetent, inefficient, and worthy of the work entrusted to them. How do you become a preacher of a truth that you failed to believe? And yet, Jesus comes and entrusts to these men whom he had chosen the work of bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth. Of course, you're right to say, is this the apostolic group challenged to believe that they are going to bring the gospel to the end of the world? He had showed himself to another 2. Here, Mark doesn't mention their names directly, but we know the 2 were going to Emmaus in the countryside. These went back and told the disciples the same thing, that they had seen him. And the disciples are constant in one thing. They didn't believe the Lord. They didn't believe that the Lord had risen. They didn't believe what they had proclaimed. Mark says, lastly, he showed himself to them. And they were at table. He reproached them for their incredulity, for their obstinacy, because they had refused to believe those who had seen him and after he had risen. My dear friends, sometimes it is important for us to ask, why is it 2 times that Mark repeats they didn't believe? Then they were scolded for not believing. And then the Lord finally says, go out to the whole world and proclaim the gospel to all creation. These people have been presented to us like incompetent, unworthy of the call they have been given. We know if we were to look at them and judge Jesus for the choices he made, we would say the Lord went wrong in their choice. Or somebody would have analyzed and said, what was the training that they were given in the 2 years that they stayed with the Lord? Because actually Mark remembers to tell us that they were chosen to stay with him, such that when later on in chapter 14, Peter denies the Lord, in fact, once he said, even you were staying with the Lord, even you were with him. He denied being part of those who were staying with Jesus, which means staying with him was the way of formation. So the question was, what did they learn? What did Jesus teach them while they were staying with him? Why is it so difficult for them to believe that the Lord is risen, up to the point of being scolded by him for their incredulity? My dear brothers and sisters, very easy for us to say, well, they are supposed to have believed him. But the truth is, the Lord doesn't call people and send them because of the power of their faith. There is always some kind of negative reading of the Lord's plan in the lives of the people when we tend to imagine that the Lord has called me because I have a lot of faith, because I'm prayerful, because I believed him. In fact, the Lord, regardless that these disciples who didn't believe that he had risen, and they heard twice that he had risen, from Mary Magdalene, from the other two disciples of Emmaus. The Lord did not stop at it and say, now you are not ready to be sent. He gave them the biggest mission. He gave them the mandate which is of the church up to today, the mandate which belongs to the mother church, but belongs to each Christian, each baptized. So then, do we have to believe totally? Do we have to be without doubt in order for us to be sent to go to bring the good news to the people? Evidently no. At least from this gospel and from the way Jesus is presenting himself, what matters is, first of all, this, that he believes in you. In fact, Jesus demonstrates with no confusion absolutely that he is the believer. He believes in his disciples. He believes in these disciples and their capacity. He sees beyond what we see. He sees beyond the obvious. He sees beyond their doubt, and he sees the time when all of them, one after the other, will die martyrs, will die believing much more in the gospel than in themselves anymore. Not because anymore they have heard from the other testimonies, but because along their lives they have encountered the Lord. And that is very important. The Lord calls me. The Lord invites me. The Lord wants me among his disciples, not because my faith is strong, not because my faith is rigidly planted somewhere, but because he knows I am capable of growing into that form which he proposes into my life, into that faith that he wants me to have. He knows that by inviting me, by trusting me, he is going to work on me. And working on me means perhaps I become, little by little, the gospel that my brothers and sisters read in their daily life. It's important for us to remember that the resurrection of the Lord wasn't easy for the disciples, just as it couldn't be easy for us today if somebody who died just returned to life. We have seen cases whereby, because of mistaken identity, somebody is thought to have died. They just get the body from the morgue. They arrive home, they start the funeral, and the presumed dead person shows up. Everybody disappears. That's, at least in our African culture, is explained by the fact that we think, oh, that is his spirit. We know that even for the disciples, Jesus had to tell them clearly, look, I am not a ghost. A ghost doesn't eat. A ghost doesn't have flesh and bones like I do. They needed to hear the Lord reassuring them. But again, my dear brothers and sisters, what counts is not the double doubt. Two times these ones didn't believe. First of all, the woman, because Mary Magdalene told them clearly that the Lord had risen. And then the two disciples of Emmaus. Two is very important because it's evidently the number that, according to the biblical terms, means there is a testimony. I saw, and somebody else was with me to see it, and the testimony of two is believable. And even after he had showed himself to the two, they were doubting. What does this mean for me and for you? My doubt isn't the reason as to why I don't grow in faith. If I continue searching, if my doubt pushes me to search, then you can be sure that I, like the disciples, like the 11, will not only share a meal with the Lord as he was inviting us yesterday, but I will actually proceed and go on to serve him among my brothers and sisters and bring this word to everybody. Somebody says, we got this difficulty, and I have had this a lot from the youth. I have seen it when I was working among the youth, and even now it emerges in among other people. You hear somebody saying, I am unable to convince the people of the faith that I have. You don't have to convince anybody. That is not your work. Be the gospel yourself. Be the living gospel yourself. Then they will ask themselves the question, why is this man, why is this woman living like this? And the answer you will give them, I have encountered Christ. If you have made a personal encounter with Christ, then for sure you don't need to explain anything, because you know the Lord believes you and you believe him. The Lord loves you and he loves you. It is simple. The principle is this for our spiritual life. The Lord, with his grace, presents us all the time in order to make sure that what he starts, he also completes. Thank you very much. That's the bits of the gospel today.